Yes, let me just open. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to start. I hope our Minister, His Excellency Max Antorina Fontaine, Minister of Environment, Sustainable Development of the Republic of Madagascar, is on his way. We have to start because we have limited time. My name is Anil Misra. I am from Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, UNESCO. And this session, we are going to talk about the role of international organizations like IHP, how to advance scientific frontiers. What are the challenges of water resources and hydrology and how we move forward? And what are the opportunities and what we can deliver to address water resources challenges of the world. And before we start, we have a distinguished panel list here. I will introduce to the panel, and I hope by that time our minister will also arrive. You would need to put your headphone, otherwise it will be very hard to, because there will be noise. So please put on your headphone so that you are not distracted by outside noise. So let me start quickly running through the slides. This slide that shows that in this context of uncertainty, what we call stationarity is dead. That means that past is no longer relevant to future, how to survive. And I want to quote Charles Darwin, who said it is not the strongest or the most intelligent who will survive, but those who can best manage change. What does that mean? That is adaptation. So we need to do adaptation in water sources. And since the planet is facing triple planetary crisis, biodiversity loss, climate change, pollution, we need to address those challenges through intergovernmental program, bringing all the member states together, bringing all the scientific entities, Category 2 centers, chairs, and work on a holistic approach with this, our 9th phase of IHP, Science for a Water Secure World in a Changing Environment. Welcome, Excellency Minister. I see that he's just in time. Mr. Max Antorina Fontaine, Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development, Republic of Madagascar. Excellency, you might need to put headphones so that you can hear. So let's continue to go. IHP started from 1970s. After International Hydrological Decade, we are already in the 9th phase. And the importance that we see to bring scientific frontiers. Paul Crutzen invented or discovered, he made scientific discovery in nitrogen oxide in 1970, which is very much accredited to Anthropocene. And he was awarded with Nobel Prize in 1995. It took him 25 years to get Nobel Prize. All the scientists will not get, but we need to find a way to provide incentive to scientists so that they can provide scientific advances to the community. There are scientific papers addressing several challenges, but whether that is really used in national countries basis, we will hear from our panelists. And considering that there are many scientific efforts, but with the silos, we have IPCC scenarios, we have world water development, whether that is useful to really find solution, Excellency Minister, in your country, considering that UNESCO is proposing to have capacity development and validated scientific assessment in every country. So how do we do that? We will have a thematic group on different aspects: flood and drought, adaptation, groundwater, ecohydrology, water quality through UNESCO centers and chairs, and we work with member states to use their data, available data, and validate at the national scale. And that can be supported by peer-reviewed publications. And that can be also included in UNESCO's network, IHP WINS, Water Information Network. So we are developing tools and methodologies such as the one that I'm showing now. I don't think that screen is moving. The climate risk informed decision analysis. Oh. So this was not moving. Yeah, anyway, so no, it doesn't work. What I wanted to, so anyway, you will hear, it's not working very well. Okay, please go to next slide. I thought it was moving. Next slide, I already talked about it. Next slide, next slide, next slide, next slide, next slide. Yeah, so climate risk informed decision analysis, which is IHP's focal flagship program, which provides tools for countries to really providing to address climate change issues at the local scale. And I would like to invite you to go to our website. Next slide, please. And this methodology has been recognized by GCF, Global Climate Fund, Green Climate Fund, and World Bank as a resilient methodology. So every proposal that going through Green Climate Fund has to go through this CRIDA stress tool test. So I would like to encourage you to use that. Next slide, please. And of course, we want to use citizen science with the development of low-cost sensors and 3D printers. There is a possibility to enhance capacity at the local level. Next slide, please. And that, all those information we can create in water information network system. And next slide, please. And with that, you know, the main idea here is we have technology. We have open science. We have citizen science policy. We can engage with the stakeholders. So how can we do that? How we will be able to really address water source challenges and help countries to support with these tools and methodologies through IHP program. Now I stop here, and I would like to invite each of the panelists in 5 and 6 minutes to respond to the questions. They can answer the question, what are the challenges, particular water source challenges, or what are the opportunities for scientific advances, and what case studies they can bring. We'll start with His Excellency Minister from Madagascar. Minister, can you share any successful case studies or pilot project on science-based water management in Madagascar? Based on lesson learned, what role do you see for the UNESCO Intergovernmental Hydrological Program in accelerating adoption of these practices in Madagascar? Over to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. So to give you a brief context about, do you hear me? Now it's better? Okay, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. So before answering your question, I'd like to give you a brief context on the water situation in Madagascar. You know, we are an island, so already, even if it's not drinkable water, we are surrounded by water, an island in the middle of the ocean. Then a really important and interesting fact is that Madagascar has got the second biggest drinkable water reserve in Africa after DRC. So normally we shouldn't have water problems, but still, you know, with the demographical challenges, with the deforestation since many decades, and I loved what I saw in your presentation because there was the term dynamic. And it's all about dynamics, you know. Even if we bring science into it, it's not a one-time study that will give you the key, the solution forever. it's a permanent movement because even water is never stagnant. Water keeps moving under the soil, in the oceans, between water moves even in its own element. So we cannot suppose that one case, one study, one scientific research is valid forever. And we need to keep maintaining the science, and science in water decisions, in water management for a country needs to be considered at every level. So at the strategical level, in order for the government to take the right policies, you need to base these policies on science. What are the trends? What is the actual situation? What were the past dynamics? Where are the reserves? What are the social needs? What are the best way to deliver, to answer, to fill these needs? So if in the water resources management, if we do not work closely with science, we can be sure that all the decisions that we are going to take will not be successful, will be failures, and it will be money thrown in the trash, and it will be a failure from the government because we would then fail to provide an essential right to our population. Then also science when you are on the ground, when you are on the field. And science is not only about scientific research, geophysical research. There is also social science because water is something that we humans use, and we need to bring around the table a lot of expertise. If I give you the example of the south of Madagascar, the great south of Madagascar, which is, even if we have a huge water reserve, we also face huge drought, and we experienced a famine in 2021, and the UN stated that it was the first famine exclusively due to the effect of the climate change. So then you understand that it's way more complex than what we imagine. So to tackle complex problem, we really need to try to focus on 360 solutions, talk with different expertise, and unfortunately in the Great South of Madagascar, there were many millions of dollars that were invested in water resources, in water infrastructures. And when you go visit them, most of the time, there is not even a single person around the infrastructure. The population didn't appropriate the projects, maybe because the projects didn't consider social beliefs, didn't consider the social dynamics in the population, and it's money that we just spend out of nothing, no result, no impact. So that is why it's a really complex topic. The new approach in the government of Madagascar is to consider water as a holistic approach, as I said. So we have this multi-use system now. We don't do water projects only for drink or water projects only for agriculture. We try, if we invest in one river, for instance, how can we optimize it by making sure we're going to use at the same time water for the human, water for the livestock, water for agriculture, water for all the needs that can be filled with that. And we've noticed that it's way more successful because you give way more weight to the water. Even if it looked obvious that water should be a universal right and it's free, etc., in the society where we live in, water is a social issue, and sometimes the best way to make sure the resource is sustainable is to give it not for free. The infrastructures, the local population manage them, the water infrastructures, and they make money out of the management because we need to make efforts to provide these water services. So there is even economic science in it, in managing the water resources. So you asked me how can UNESCO help in this research. For instance, around one of our protected areas, I was there 1 month ago in the northeastern part of Madagascar. The local communities who are preserving this forest, they are the really guardians of our environment, but they are not being paid enough for that. They don't have the good enough infrastructures, but they protect our water resources and they don't have drinkable water. So in this kind of project, UNESCO worked with the government of Madagascar into providing new drinkable water resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. really you provided a synthesis of the challenges, I would say, from evidence-based policy to how to monitor infrastructure. So we will come back during the Q&A session. I mean, this is very, very comprehensive statement. Looking from the African perspective, now we will go to global challenges, scientific frontiers. So I would like to invite Professor John Pomeroy to present, after listening a case study from Madagascar, what are the hydrological or water science frontiers, what are the opportunities, and what IHP can bring to address these problems in different countries, particularly in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mishra. I'm a hydrologist, and so I study hydrological processes. I take measurements in the field, I build models, and then we say, what can we do that would advance the frontiers of hydrology, of things of value to society? There are great operational needs from hydrological sciences. One, as the flooding disasters in Spain very recently have shown, we need improved capability for water-related disaster warnings. The warning systems have to be right to the community level from the scientific modeling level. The second is that we need to be able to diagnose and predict future impacts on societies and ecosystems of our changing water supplies. And to support these, we need to develop new models, tools, and approaches to manage water-related risks, particularly in ungauged basins, areas that's undergoing severe adaptation to climate change, such as where there's deglaciation or a rapid thaw of snowpacks or permafrost, and to manage risk in areas with increasing flood frequency. We are supported in this by three revolutions which have occurred under the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program since 1975. A revolution in observations with new sensors, data loggers, satellite sensors, and other measurements across the globe, which have vastly improved our capability to assess our water resources. The second is the revolution in predictions. And so we've gone from a very simple computer simulations to very sophisticated ones that run on high-performance computers and are capable of calculating global hydrology and water resource and help in down-to-earth local water management and forecasting issues. The third revolution has been in coupling those observations and predictions, whether it's looking at the analysis of impacts of climate change or drought prediction or dealing with changing floods. So we need more than this. So from science, there's a strong call from users to engage in the development of observational networks and prediction programs, citizen science, but even more, indigenous communities want their knowledge recognized, they want them incorporated in solutions and given the rightful standing that they have as a fantastic body of knowledge. We need to mobilize our knowledge and co-create our knowledge to find solutions that are appropriate in communities, and this means working with the communities from the beginning of the scientific project and all the way through, addressing their questions and working with them in answering these. And then finally, we have to look at different sectors, a multi-sectoral approach for inclusion of community engagement. We think doing this, we can define a transdisciplinary water science to address the challenges of our future. So engage the users in developing the research questions, co-develop the observing network and the decision support systems with the users, let them lead the co-development of solutions and the posing of questions, and make sure we're investing in capacity development, policy revision, and institutional reform. We have examples of this in Canada and internationally. In Canada, we brought together the Global Water Futures Program, the largest university-led water research program in the world, with 213 university professors from 23 universities, but engaging with 570 users from across the country. And this led to improvement of water outcomes for indigenous communities, for national modeling programs and prediction programs, for dealing with drought, for dealing with specific issues like the contamination of the Great Lakes and transboundary issues with the United States. Internationally, we can do this through the International Year of Glaciers Preservation in 2025 by making sure that as we lose our glaciers and changes in our cryosphere, that we are engaging with the communities in the mountains that are impacted by this, but also with downstream communities that will have changes in the water supply. And we have an opportunity to implement this through the International Decade of Action in the Cryospheric Sciences, which runs from 2025 to 2034. So thank you.
Thank you, John, for highlighting what are the opportunities from the science perspective. We will, of course, hear from Commissioner from Uganda, Ministry of Water Environment, but before that, I mean, we will hear from Commissioner about the capacity development need in Africa. But before going into capacity development need, we would like to hear from the technology. What are the recent technological innovation that is helping water source management? And that technology, I think we will relate to cases, the application from Africa later on. So first, I would like to go to Ms. Lynn Govers, Director Water and Energy Transition, VITO. And question to you, Madam, how has VITO leveraged recent scientific advancement and technological innovation to enhance water source management? Can you share specific case studies that demonstrate the practical application and scalability of these innovation and possible synergies with UNESCO ISP? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for this kind introduction. And maybe first a few words about VITO. So VITO is a science and technology institute, and our mission is to contribute to global sustainable development. We organize ourselves around 3 impact domains: resilient ecosystems, healthy environment, and regenerative economy. And we are a multidisciplinary institute of about 1,300 researchers, and this is really important when we talk about water challenges, and also are very focused on applied research. So we do work together with scientists and universities. We do have low TRL research in our institute, but mainly also focus on the application and bringing technology and science to governments, private sector, and also citizens. We are also quite actively involved in international projects to support governments and private parties in their climate strategies in general, both on mitigation when it comes to energy, for example, but also focused on adaptation and also looking at close links between them, like, for example, on the water, energy, food nexus. Of course, water security is an important field in this topic, and we engage in this endeavor in many international networks, like UNESCO, for example, and like to support also these partners with our scientific knowledge. So I would like to thank UNESCO EHP very much for the invitation to be in this panel, and because it's close to our heart, how to understand water systems and its complex challenges, and what's the role of technology and science in global water security. And I was asked to bring one specific case to this panel, and I'm very pleased also to hear the interventions of the Minister of Madagascar and our colleague professor, because I think it's the case I want to bring to the table is very much in line with the ideas that they already brought to the table. So we coordinate a big project around the lakes of Tanganyika and Kivu in Africa, which is surrounded by several countries like Rwanda, the Republic of Congo, and so on. And is a very large freshwater volume. It holds about 80% of world's available freshwater volume. So it has a global significance and also serves as a source of economic development and well-being for about 12 million people that live around these lakes. It provides drinking water, supports industrial development, and also hosts one of the largest fish stocks, has a very rich biodiversity, and also acts as a crucial transportation route, and so also creates opportunities for cross-border trade and investment. And 5 years ago, Lake Tanganyika was designated as the most threatened lake of the year, which is of course not a good thing. It faces many challenges like the population growth and poverty around the lake. So issues like overfishing, unsustainable agricultural practices, deforestation, pollution, and so on, pose significant challenges for a large population living around Lake Tanganyika and Kivu. And what we now did in this project is we worked together with a lot of private parties, but also researchers, local research institutes, also NGOs and citizens to build a transnational environmental monitoring system on water security around the lake. It brings new technologies related to sensoring, but also technologies related to water purification, monitoring. So the idea is to build a digital platform on environmental performance of the lake, but also to make it accessible for all the stakeholders that are needed to solve the challenges of the water system and around these lakes. So we also engage a lot with our multidisciplinary experts. We also engage in the local community, stakeholder management and so on, to bring all these people together around this ecosystem, make use of it, train the people, and make sure that it's really implemented in practice by the community itself. So I do think that this case is very important when we look at it from its multidisciplinary approach, the capacity building that we do with the governmental partners, private partners, and also citizens. And what we also do want is to work together with international networks like UNESCO to bring this on a higher scale. This is you can replicate this system. We can broaden it. We can share these good practices in these international networks and look forward to future projects in this sense.
Thank you very much. A very interesting case study, but also the advances that undertaken by Vito. Now, we started with a case from Africa. We will go back to Africa, and we would like to hear, after listening all these scientific advancement, the technology, what are the capacity development needs in Africa? How can UNESCO support Africa? And what are if there are any specific cases in Uganda, a specific case in Uganda, where one of these technology that is mentioned, including citizen size, has been applied or needs to be applied, so that we can work together with you, Mr. Commissioner. Our panelist, Mr. Kalis Tindi Mugaya, Commissioner, Ministry of Water and Environment, Uganda. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ani. On behalf of the government of Uganda, I would like to thank UNESCO for inviting us to be part of this session, also to share our insights. Uganda has been part of the IHP, Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, UNESCO, and we are proud actually to be able to benefit from the program. As you have rightly said, we have a number of challenges that require improved capacity. But just as a start, just to give some perspectives, Uganda is located in the eastern part of Africa. It's part of the Nile Basin. The Nile Basin is made up of 10 countries that share the Nile. And Uganda is a downstream country with respect to East African countries, but also it is upstream with respect to South Sudan, Sudan, and Egypt. So Uganda's position is such that we are both downstream and upstream, and we have to bear in mind the interest of upstream countries and also ensure that we don't affect downstream countries. In Uganda, we have undertaken our water resources assessment studies. We have determined the amount of water we have in the country, 43 billion cubic meters of water as annual renewable water resources. But we have noted that 69% of that water comes from outside our borders. So when we are managing our water resources, we have also to take note of the transboundary nature of our water resources. So what are the challenges that we are faced with within Uganda and indeed within East Africa region? We are having challenge of high population growth. Our population is growing, and of course it comes with increased demand for food, for water, for energy, but that also affects the environment. We are having high environmental degradation. People are trying to improve agriculture. They are encroaching on fragile ecosystems. The trees are being cut. The riverbanks are being affected. We have, of course, increased pollution as we try to develop. Then we are, of course, putting in industries, and some of them are discharging waste that is not treated, but also poor sanitation facilities. And, of course, at the heart of that, climate change. So climate change is already coming in. to find other challenges and making the situation worse. Uganda has a lot of water, so we wouldn't actually be crying about water. Our problem is actually water management. During the rainy season, we're having too much water, having floods. Just a few months down the road, we have too little water, resulting in droughts. And of course, all of that comes with pollution and the impact on human health. So our challenge right now is to manage these resources. But of course, you cannot manage what you don't understand. And that's why, working with the other countries in the Nile Basin, we have taken advantage of improved technology in monitoring. And I think, as the other panelists mentioned, we are now have invested in telemetry, where we can monitor and receive data online. But of course, these stations are not enough. It's one thing also to set up a station, but another one to operate it. It's actually easier to get money to set up a station, but harder to operate it. And I think that's one of the challenges we are faced with in Africa, is how do you maintain a station? And that's why investing in innovative technologies, for example, remote sensing, artificial intelligence, is going to be key also in some of those locations where we cannot reach. So again, in terms of capacity, that's an area that we need to invest, but also being able to analyze the data and make sense out of it. Again, as has been mentioned by the other panelists, we need to have science-informed decision-making. And unfortunately, in most of Africa, decisions are taken without actually any scientific information. Why? Because the capacity in many situations are limited, but also the capacity to even make sense out of the data. You may correct the data, but how do you analyze the data? Sometimes also the data is actually in hard copies in many countries, but we are improving also in setting up information systems. For example, in Uganda, we have set up a water and environment information system. It is under development with the support of the World Bank, and we would want that wherever you are, you can actually go in the system and check the data we have. But of course, at the heart of that is the quality of the data. What is the quality of the data? You may correct the data, but what is the quality of the data? The capacity, as I have mentioned, institutional capacity. Our institutions are weak. One of the things, of course, we notice that when, for example, a flood happens, we may take a month before we respond. Maybe by the time we respond, the flood event has gone. So again, the challenges in many countries, institutional capacity, financial resources. Again, you may actually want to go to the field and correct the data. Then you are looking for money and you take 2 weeks before you get money, and then you are not saving lives. But at the country level, and the case I would want to put across, which really maybe we are proud of and we feel other countries can borrow from, but also where we feel we can work with UNESCO, IHP to move forward. We have realized that you cannot manage water resources without involving the users. So we have divided the country into 4 regions. We call them water management zones. Again, recognizing that water doesn't follow administrative boundaries. So we have created regional offices because also we feel that you cannot address challenges when you are far from where it is happening. So we have created 4 regional offices in the country. We call them water management zones. And each of the offices will have about 30 staff who are specifically looking at these issues. They are mobilizing the stakeholders, first of all, to get to know what issues are there on the ground, what is causing them, and what can be done. We have gone further to develop those 4 water management zones into smaller units. We call them catchments. And for each catchment, we are developing a catchment management plan. And that's where now science is actually coming in, citizen science, the hydrology, so that we can understand the resource. For each catchment, we do a water resources analysis, where we want to know the resource base, groundwater, surface water. We also look at the demand and be able to see the potential to utilize these resources. But within that assessment, we are also looking at the impacts of climate change. And we are looking at the forecasting so that we see what will happen after a few years with respect to climate change, but also increased demand. But the process is stakeholders driven. And to us, that's where we are changing the way we have been doing things. We are getting the stakeholders on board to be part of identifying the problem, part of identifying the solutions, and being able to take action. And each catchment has interventions for water development, for water management, but also for building the capacity of the stakeholders. And each catchment has a catchment management committee where the stakeholders are part of the process. And we are using the data. We are using the data we collect to be able to guide the stakeholders on the decision. But of course, we still have gaps. Gaps again of taking advantage of all the information and making adequate sense out of it, but also looking ahead into the future. And this is where we would want to work with IHP to see how we can use CRIDA to understand more and be able to manage the resource better. And we feel that that will put us on a good level to be able to inform decisions that are going to help the country address these challenges. And we feel that such examples should actually be adopted and supported in the rest of Africa so that we can manage these resources for the future of our countries. Thank you.
What a fascinating statement. I was thinking Mr. Commissioner really provided a whole book chapter. He touched upon extreme events. He touched upon transboundary issue of more than 69% of the water comes to Uganda from outside of the border. I'm not going to repeat what he said, but really it's a book, what he presented here. So there must be lots of questions to such a wise personality here. I would hand over microphone to my colleague Ruth Nuguma. She's also from Africa, and she has Africa experiences coming from her one country. But also now you will have questions, and she will moderate the session, and let's make this session very interactive. And at the end of the question answer session, I will be inviting Ms. Elena Lopez, Senior Research Fellow, to provide some of the key messages and concluding remarks. But first, Ruth, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. Now that you've already listened about the advances in water science and technology, now would like you to ask some of the questions to our panelists so that they may be able to answer us, and especially in line with the missing link between the advances in water science and the application on the ground. And from what you have heard from every case, please, we would like to invite you questions. Anyone with a question? Oh, thank you. There is some. Wait for the mic.
Good morning. My name is Antherem Iragena. I'm from Uganda, Minister of Water and Environment, and I'm glad to have my boss on the panel and the rest of the panelists. Thank you for the insights and the good discussions. I'm interested in this topic. It's a good one. The minister in Bangladesh, in Madagascar, he talked about the issue of science and policy. And I note that normally in many countries, integrating science in policy decision making is always hard and often requires knowledge brokers who can understand the science, translate it, and be able to present it and explain it to policymakers so as to have better policies and which can benefit the communities. I wanted to learn from you. Have you experienced something like this? What's experience in Madagascar in this? Thank you.
Over to you.
Yeah, that one works. Well, thank you for this question, and it's a really, really interesting question, not only in the scope of water, but in every scope that needs science, on all the environmental projects, on transport, on energy. And I think that for too long, and this is the main reason why the world and the planet is in this state, is that politics and scientists weren't hearing each other. Maybe they were talking to each other, but not understanding. And we are really trying, actually, with the government of Madagascar, to give more weight to the science, because everything that the science said would happen in terms of climate change, etc., for us, it's not a scenario anymore. It's already the daily reality. And you know, at the end of the day, even if someone is not a specialist in science, when you touch the money, yeah, now it works. Yeah, when we touch the money, everyone understands.
Sorry, don't touch. Okay, perfect. Yes. Don't touch. Is the signal here? Okay.
Yeah. So when you touch the finance, then everyone understands the concrete impact, you know, of not listening to the scientists. So I really do feel that slowly and slowly, the leaders are now listening to scientists. But the problem is that science makes long-term prediction, etc., and politics often are in charge for a small term, you know. So that is a really systemic reason why politics do not listen to scientists. And on the other way, I do think also that for too long, scientists struggled to explain in simple words the problems. And there was a gap that was so big that it took time to bridge that gap. And I think it's the role of the ministers, of the person that should be at the political level, but that should be based on science, you know, to close that gap, to bridge that gap. And it's, I don't know a country where it's perfect. I don't know a country where it's totally zero, and it's just a dynamic. But this is, if we want to tackle climate change, we do really need to make sure that scientists have one of the top seats at the political discussions.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? At least you have heard about it. Of course, between politicians and scientists, there has been limited conversation and also the breakdown in language and interpretation of the scientific output. And this is an area that we may need also in future to be able to get to talk about it and also to bring the politicians in, because it seems that the politicians have more power in terms of finances and all that, and they can be able to push things to happen. But for the scientists, you can just sit in the lab and you need somebody to speak for you to be able to implement your scientific output. Another question from the... Okay. No other question. There is another question from Anil. Please give him the mic.
Now, recent, can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. We have scientific advancement. Science has advanced, but we have also challenges. And whether the advancement of science is able to take those challenges, and can we also create buy-in effect in the countries where we are facing more and more challenges? I don't know who wants to take this question. I'm just throwing it.
Okay, John?
Yes, thank you. We've had a 8-year program called Global Water Futures in Canada, and we trained over 2,000 students and engineers and technicians in this program and tried to find solutions for many of the water problems in the country. But we work very closely with governments at the local scale, at the provincial scale, at the national scale. And this had tremendous impact because now the research is ending. So what's the legacy? Now we have a new Canada Water Agency at the federal government level to coordinate the national response to water, to manage data, to look at transboundary relationships with the United States and between provinces, and to raise the involvement of Indigenous people in water management. Now we have a massive hiring by all the provinces and territories in their water management and improvement of their flood prediction. And we've had very good discussions. Where I live in Western Canada, we had a snow drought last year. Snow in the Canadian Rocky Mountains was very, very low and melted 5 weeks early due to extreme heat. What happened was, as scientists, myself and others, suggested there's not going to be enough water for irrigation for the cities and for downstream users. And we started raising the alarm very early through the year. The government responded, and it sat down with the water users, the irrigation districts and the cities, and said, okay, even though you all have water rights, if you use all of your water rights, there won't be enough. So we need you to agree without coming down from the top, a bottom-up agreement to waive your rights this year and share the water. And they all agreed, which was amazing, because the science issue had been brought clearly forward. And then as a result, yes, the irrigators had less water, the cities had water restrictions, but there was enough for the ecosystem, there was enough for downstream users. We got through the crisis. So science can help and can work with governments and to help them with the cooperative approaches that are needed to deal with very complex water problems and issues.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Maybe I can comment on
Yes,
that. I think
yes.
building on what John has mentioned. To me, I think as scientists, we tend to do scientific work and we think that's the end. To me, I think we need to create more partnerships with those that can break our scientific knowledge and information into the messages people would understand, but also speak for us. How much are we involving the civil society? They may not be doing scientific work, but they are good at speaking. What about the media? The media, probably, if you talk to them, they can get our messages and turn them into attractive information that the decision makers can get. So, to me, I think we talk about interdisciplinarity. I think we need to practice in reality and bring on board the other stakeholders, create more partnerships so that we can have a movement. Otherwise, many scientists are not actually politicians. I don't know, Honourable Minister, whether probably scientists are shying away from politics. Maybe if we had more scientists in the political position, maybe they would speak science at that level. But many politicians, I don't know, Honourable Minister, whether it's the same in Madagascar or elsewhere, but scientists tend to remain in the lab, and they are not joining politics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You can add.
I feel addressed. As scientists, we try to come out of the lab, and also I think what's important is, of course, we have scientists in the lab because science and research has to evolve, and it starts in a lab. But also to bridge the gap between science and policy making, it's important that scientists also speak the language of policymakers themselves. And I want to give an example. We have a cooperation with the African Union, for example, on the NDCs, the National Determined Contributions, which are key in the Paris Agreement and climate planning of all countries. And we support African countries in drafting their NDCs. It started from mitigation, but we are now discussing to also work on methodologies on adaptation, and then water comes into the picture, to work on methodologies like how to calculate benefits from adaptation measures, how to calculate the impact on climate adaptation, and so on. And this is the type, this feeds into the formal policy instruments that are set out in the Paris Agreement, and that's important for us that we found. It took us a while to think about how to translate the knowledge we have on climate planning into practical instruments, and then through the NDCs, and this is very fine cooperation that we have with the African Union, we managed to translate it to the policymakers in several African countries, and to also work together then again with private companies, and really look at this as also a kind of an investment plan, to work on this planning and make it also happen in practice by working together with many of the stakeholders like industries and also citizens.
Okay, thank you. At least you have had one more question. Please give her the mic.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the panel. It was really interesting. My name is Fatima Isamadeen, and I work for an organization called Leave It in the Ground Initiative. And my question is more related to pollution that multiple of you mentioned. And I'm wondering that how easy it is to get policy regulation for very strong, like for industries that has very strong lobby. And for example, I know specific cases in Canada where, for example, fossil fuel related industries are have really strong lobby. And if you have any experience to be able to influence regulations, so then water is not polluted in the future, and maybe if there's any other examples.
Okay. John, please respond in 1 minute. We have...
Okay, I'll respond very quickly. I grew up on the shores of Lake Erie And when I was a boy, we were told not to touch the water because it was toxic. The smell of dead fish from the lake was disgusting. The river in my city caught fire every year on a regular basis because of oil and gas. This created a crisis that was addressed in 1970 through the creation of Environment Canada and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Lake Erie is now much better. It's not perfect. The river has salmon, not fire. So these things can happen. The oil sands in northern Alberta are a very challenging situation. And a transboundary agreement has been negotiated with the downstream Northwest Territories, small indigenous population, very poor, which holds Alberta to account on the water quality and on the water flows in there. And the agreement has zero tolerance for pollution or for changes in flow. So, and action has been taken on this. What was interesting is during drought, the oil sands producers were forced to shut down some processing plants. So if there's enough public pressure, and we use the Rosenberg Forum to have a big public meeting to do this, and also brought up the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, then it is possible to make progress here.
Okay, thank you so much. What an interesting panel. We have at least 1 minute, and this is what I want to say. There is actually an agreement that there is a missing link between technological advancements in water and applications on the ground, and the scientists are not talking to the politicians. And I think this is the place where UNESCO comes in as a platform whereby we can be able to create cooperation, and that we may be able to create like a movement where we can be able to connect those that are leading the technological advancement and those that are applying it, and we can be able to speak to the politicians and member states and be able to like promote to them the kind of scientific advances and technologies that can be implemented and translated into applications on the ground. So thank you so much, and we welcome Elena to be able to give us a summary. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So it's possible. They have salmon in them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to say that we really welcome the Spanish Pavilion. We are very privileged to have hosted the IHP program from UNESCO and some of the best scientists and politicians that are really taking science into account. Which I think, as you all know, in Spain, we've just experienced very dramatic flooding after a very serious drought that is still ongoing in the southern part of Spain. So, in this world of extremes, science indeed is going to be critical. So in this decade of action, I think what I heard from this panel, and I want to summarize as kind of key messages, I really like the idea that we have to manage change. Charles, it was mentioned from the beginning, Charles Darwin, this dynamic world, is here. We don't recognize some of the hydrological system has been really altered now due to climate change. So therefore, we do need indeed science-informed decision-making. Because we cannot manage what we do not understand. We heard this indeed from all the panelists. We also heard that we are undergoing three revolutions, as Professor John said, observation, prediction, and the coupling of observation and prediction, which is really opening new ways of understanding when we really need to do this real-time monitoring and evaluation of what is actually happening. But indeed, we also heard all knowledge is needed. No, we need indeed scientists, but we also need people, and we need citizen scientists with the indigenous knowledge, and in my country, we also need local knowledge, as we actually really learned in the recent flooding in Valencia and in Malaga. I think, we will live in, we have to manage these water-related risks. They are going to be increasing, and we heard very good case studies. We heard about the forest guardians in Madagascar, about Lake Tanganyika and how we really involving people, the 12 million people that live around the lake. And then the final example, which I thought was also really like catching, on this, this basically river, that caught fire. And now, thanks to public pressure and regulation, now has been, in a way, we have been able to turn around, a very polluted river. So I think this concept that I heard about appropriation by people, the co-development of solutions, and how science has to be really inclusive, because it is also for people, and how, we need to start to co-develop solutions with them. This idea of science, policy, sometimes politics gets in the way, And we also have to think about practitioners. We heard about Uganda, how they're really investing in people, in, these 4 basins and staff, invested into understanding, these catchments. And also the role of science brokers, from the audience, this idea that we need translators for science, and the role of science communication. So I think with this, I think we're really, really grateful. That we are very, very proud and very pleased to have hosted you in the Spanish Pavilion. And hopefully, I know that Spain is very engaged with the IHP program, with Dr. Anil Mishra, so we hope to be able to continue to engage. This is not just a one-stop shop. This is a process that we have to engage. So thank you very much.